Hello, this is Pastor Rick, and I want to welcome you to our Sunday Forum for Sunday, October the 10th, where we will continue our series on wisdom literature in the Bible. We're going to be talking today about Ecclesiastes, known for that famous line, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. But this is the third in a four-part series. We started in the New Testament with the book of James. Last week we did Proverbs, took a look at that wonderful book filled with wisdom from Solomon. And now we're heading into Ecclesiastes. Next week, the book of Job. So let's dive into this very important book, Ecclesiastes. And you really have to say it's a difficult book. So you have to prepare yourself for some dark chapters, because Ecclesiastes begins with really two people that we need to be thinking about. The author, the person who's writing Ecclesiastes, and the author then introduces to us the teacher. You see this in verses 1. The words of the teacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. And then he says, vanity of vanities, says the teacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. So I see this book like having a guest professor, a guest lecturer at one of my classes at the university. I'm inviting him in because I want everyone to hear his words, to hear his lecture. And so that's what we have here. The author is inviting in this teacher to bring, his wisdom, to bring his insight, and then later at the end of the book, the author then will try to summarize and bring this all together, just like a professor might for a guest professor. Okay, so we have to brace ourselves because obviously the author has brought in the teacher to bring a massive critique on all of life. That's where these words of vanity and vanity come in. And so here I would say the key idea is, and you'll see this in the film, this word hevel, which means smoke or vapor. And that all life is like that vapor when you try to reach out because it looks solid, right? And you touch it and it just dissipates, it disappears. And so one might interpret that to say all life is meaningless, right? It's all going up in smoke. But the words of Ecclesiastes are a bit more subtle. It's not that life is meaningless, it's just that we can't know the meaning of life. I remember I used to read the French philosophers when I was in college, like Sartre, and they were the existentialists who made the same point, right? That life was meaningless. But then what do you do when life is meaningless? And here, the words of wisdom from Ecclesiastes is, no, life might have meaning, but it's going to be hidden for you. And so he says, because look at it, there are three critiques that relativize life, and yet he'll say at the end, because of that, what gives meaning or direction to life, he's going to wait for that to the end. But here he brings his critique through really three different ideas, and the first is time, the second is death, and the third is the randomness of life. And that's what, as he says, hides the meaning or makes life meaningless. First of all, time. He says we work hard, we gather our money, but the earth doesn't care, right? The mountain doesn't care. The mountains and the earth and the sky, they've looked down at the rise and fall of nations, the rise and falls of leaders, the rise and falls of families. It doesn't care. And so that's his idea, that time relativizes everything and makes all our hard labors meaningless. Death is the same way. We often say that, right? That you gather up all your bank accounts and accumulate your houses and our wealth, and then death comes, you can't take it with you, right? And so death, whether you're rich or poor, smart, clever, whatever it might be, death tends to democratize life. It brings everybody on the same plane. And then Ecclesiastes, the teacher says, that makes life meaningless. And the third, he throws out this idea of randomness, because he says, some people who shouldn't be successful are successful. Others who are smart and gifted really don't make it. It's all rather a part of chance. Life is random. And often we, experience this, or we might say life isn't fair. One of my early lessons, from my childhood, you go screaming to your mother and you say, because of something your siblings have done, life, we say, oh, that wasn't fair, that wasn't fair. And my mother used to say, well, who told you life was fair? Well, that's what the teacher is bringing in Ecclesiastes. So we have these three critiques, which are just devastating, and you're feeling kind of dark in the book, right? Time, death, and the randomness of life. And then you might just throw up your hands as you're reading this book and say, well, what good is all of life? And that's where this wisdom comes in, where he says, you still cling to God. You still live according to Proverbs, according to wisdom. Not that you might know the mind of God, not that you would know the meaning of what has just happened. You won't. And yet you live in obedience to God. And he sort of focuses in on the moment. So he's trying to humble us here through these massive critiques. And through that humbleness, we don't try to think, oh, I can control life. I can control my career. I can control my health. I can control my family, or whatever it might be, or the nation might be able to control its future. No, the teacher says. So enjoy the moment, enjoy the small things, enjoy the people that you're with, enjoy a good meal. It's very interesting where he says, since you can't control all these things, you don't know the meaning of life, enjoy the moment and obey God. And that, he says, is living according to wisdom. So let's read the book Ecclesiastes. Join us on Sunday for the conversation. And now, enjoy the film.
We're exploring 3 books in the Bible known as the wisdom literature: Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. And they're all asking the question, what does it mean to live well in this world?
So we've looked at Proverbs, who you could think of as a bright young teacher.
She's all about pursuing wisdom, an attribute of God that's woven into reality. And she's optimistic that if you use wisdom, you will build a successful life.
But then we come to Ecclesiastes, who's more like this sharp, middle-aged critic. And he says,
"You think using wisdom will bring you success. You'd better think again, because life here under the sun is meaningless."
And that's a phrase he uses a lot in this book.
But to understand this book, we have to realize first that we're hearing 2 voices.
So first there's the teacher, and we've been calling him the critic. He's the main voice in the book.
But he is introduced to us by another figure, the author. And he's the one who's collected the critic's words, and then at the end of the book summarizes everything and gets the final word.
So why does the author want us to hear from the critic?
Well, he wants to turn your view of the world upside down, and he's going to let the critic explore 3 really disturbing things about the world.
And we should warn you, these are pretty intense.
Yeah, so the first is the march of time, or as the critic says,
Generations come and generations go, but the earth, it's been here long before us and will be long after. No one remembers people from long ago, and all the people yet to come, they too will be forgotten by those who come after them.
So, on a cosmic scale, you and I, we are just a blip. Stars are born, and then they die and form planets which orbit new stars, and those planets, they change over time and eventually burn up.
And amidst this cosmic backdrop, my entire existence is like a blink in time.
Which leads to the critic's second disturbing observation, that we are all going to die.
Humans face the same fate as the animals: death. All people, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, those who offer sacrifices to God and those who do not, they all share the same destiny. All this activity and madness, then we all join the dead.
Man, this book is depressing.
And so is the final disturbing thing for the critic, and that is life's random nature.
So in Proverbs, life isn't random. There's a clear cause and effect relationship between doing the right thing and being rewarded.
But the fact is that life doesn't always work that way. The critic has observed a glitch in the system. He calls it chance, or in his words,
The race doesn't always go to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food always come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the educated. Time and chance happen to them all.
So his point is that you can't really control anything in life. It's just way too unpredictable.
So if I want to master life,
Then you're setting yourself up for a fall. Now, throughout the book, the critic uses a metaphor to tie together all of these disturbing ideas. Nearly 40 times he says that everything in life is hevel. It's a Hebrew word that means smoke or vapor. Like smoke, life is beautiful and mysterious.
it takes one shape, and before you know it, it takes a new shape.
And smoke looks solid, but try and grab it, it'll slip right through your fingers.
And when you're stuck in the thick of it, like fog, it's impossible to see clearly.
Now, our modern translations have lost the metaphor, and they usually translate hevel as meaningless. But if you read closely, the critic isn't saying that life has no meaning, but rather that its meaning is never clear. Like smoke, life is confusing, it's disorienting and uncontrollable.
So what are we supposed to do with all of this?
Well, surprisingly, the critic first of all acknowledges the perspective of Proverbs. He says it's a really good idea to learn wisdom and to live in the fear of the Lord.
Really? I mean, he just said that doesn't guarantee success.
But he knows it's the right thing to do. But secondly, and more often, he says that since you can't control your life, you should stop trying. Learn to hold things with an open hand because you really only have control over one thing, and that's your attitude towards the present moment. Stop worrying, he says, and choose to enjoy a good conversation with a friend, or the sun on your face, or a good meal with people that you care about.
The simple things in life.
Yes, and both the good things and the bad, because both are rich gifts from God. And that's the surprising wisdom of Ecclesiastes.
Listening to the critic is painful and can lead you into some dark places.
And that's why the author speaks up at the end of the book. He doesn't want you to lose hope. He wants to make you humble into someone who trusts that life has meaning even when you can't make sense of it, that one day God will clear the hevel and bring his justice on all that we've done. And so he tells us that the proper response to all of this is to fear the Lord and keep his commandments.
And that's the Book of Ecclesiastes. Now, there's one more voice in the Bible's wisdom literature, and that's the Book of Job.
And he will bring us the final, much-needed perspective on our journey into wisdom.